Well, Bear, now that the regular season's here, it's good to see you made it through the preseason with both of your knees intact.
Both my knees intact, yes. But that's okay because week one found out some things. We found out some things about some certain teams, and I think it's going to be an interesting week two as we wrap up the non-conference portion of the schedule, except for the Big Eight, and then we delve into week three in conference, and I think we'll find out even a little bit more this week.
The Packers, unfortunately, didn't even make it to week one before they lost their knees. So
I hope you didn't have any fantasy drafts yet where you did
not till Monday night,
Jordy
so
Nelson,
it was late enough.
That was ugly. That's too bad. A freak play where nobody even touched him, and one of the top 5 receivers in the NFL is gone for the year, and it just goes back to why preseason is a complete waste of time.
It's pretty much all football here again on Extra Points this week. We'll talk high school and preseason NFL, mostly revolving around Jordy's knee. All that coming up on Extra Points. Well, week 2 of high school football is upon us here at Extra Points. This is the Janesville Gazette's sports show. This is John Barry, sports writer. I'm Eric Schmoldt, sports editor of the Gazette, and we're talking pretty much all things football around here and in the state this week. It's only week 2 of the high school football season, and yet here we are, Parker, Craig, battling for the rock. What's going on with that?
I don't like it. Well, I'm doing my football weekend that previews kind of the upcoming games and kind of picks apart a subject a little bit. This week it's about that, the fact that Parker and Craig for the second year in a row are playing before school even starts.
Should never happen. It
doesn't. I got a chance to talk to Big 8 Commissioner Eric Burton, Ben McCormick. The reasons are pretty clear as to why it's set up this way. The solutions aren't as clear. And I think the biggest thing would be to establish week 9 as rivalry week. And
why is that so hard?
Because there's not enough, I guess, other schools in the Big 8 that are willing to do that.
5 true rivals?
Well, there's probably realistically 3 true rivalry games. Parker and Craig obviously is one. Easton, La Follette, and Madison is another one. Weston Memorial and another one. So that's 3. So that's 6 of the 10. That leaves Verona, Middleton, Beloit, and Sun Prairie. Well, Beloit has always considered Craig as their number 1 rival, but that may be, but let's face it, there's not a bigger rivalry than Parker and Craig. And I think certainly Verona and Middleton, a good rivalry. They're not too far apart, which would leave Sun Prairie and Beloit to play in week 9. And, I guess you could look at it from the standpoint for Sun Prairie, it's a win for them. Well, what do they care? And Beloit, they're kind of the odd man out. And if you're voted against that, then it is what it is.
What's the difference? You're going to play every team. It's not like there's
exactly.
You play every team once a season anyway. I mean, Beloit's going to run into Sun Prairie anytime. What's the difference?
And that's just it. And I think what bothers me and what I wrote in my column is the fact that the interest level this Friday night for Parker and Craig is not going to be anywhere near what it would be like if they were playing in week 9. School, students aren't back yet. So you'd have no chance for that pep assembly, for that trash talking that goes on, for those spirit days where one day it's, let's all wear green or let's all wear blue, whatever it might be to get you that build up for the Friday night game. You don't have that. And I think it's the obvious solution is to make week 9 the rivalry week. But Ben McCormick said it's something that's been brought up, but they've never really voted on it.
It doesn't make any sense to me. So here's the other thing you could do is make those 3 rivalry games the ones week 9 every year because those teams are rivals.
Yep.
Rotate the other 4 through on a revolving schedule then.
Exactly.
I mean, it's really not that hard. They have computer systems these days, these things called computers.
Right.
That will spit this information out to you if you just plug in a couple parameters. It's really not that hard. Or even if you can't make it week 9 every year, say it's going to be week 7 or later. So at least it's at a meaningful point in the season. You're not playing any rivalry games before school starts when some people don't even realize football's going on yet. It really just can't be that difficult.
No, and if you look at it, let's take this year for an example. I think we both agree Parker's a much improved team. Craig's certainly capable, I think, of making a playoff run in a conference where I think this year you don't have that prohibitive favorite. I think, Parker almost beating Middleton will tell you that the conference is wide open, which leads me to believe, let's say Parker and Craig were 4-4, or one of them was 5-3 and the other one was 4-4 going into week 9. Monterey would be rocking. And I'm not saying they're not going to have a good crowd down there Friday night for the Battle for the Rock, But I think if you push that game to week 9, it's a much different atmosphere down there.
And the other thing is, on a season where maybe things aren't going so well for either team, if they're both 2-6 or 1-7,
right,
the game still means a lot.
Yeah, because
people are still going to show up.
Exactly.
No matter what the scenario is for how the season has gone, you're always going to have a meaningful late season game.
Yeah, it's something to look forward to.
Please, for the love of God, find a computer and plug this information and vote on it and make it happen. It's not that hard, and we shouldn't be watching a rivalry game in week 2 of a football season
before school starts. And the WIA could do something about that as well, at least by pushing back the season a week or two, so that at least games started when school was in session.
Well,
and that's never.
We got a hunt
either.
there.
I know. Well, we do.
Got to don that blaze.
We got a deer hunt, and WIA's got to have the week off. So
let's get into the matchup a little bit more.
Right.
You saw Craig at Beloit last week. What are some of the takeaways that you saw from that game?
Well, I think the one thing that impressed me the most is I think it's a game that Craig should have and did win. And a lot of times, does a team that's heavily favored come down and play to the level of the team they're going up against? Or do they just come in, take care of business, get out of there with a win, and hope you avoided the injury bug? And I think that's exactly what Craig did. They went in there, set the tone early, and really continued that dominance the rest of the game. The running game was phenomenal, over 400 yards rushing, and it wasn't just one or two guys. It was a stable of backs who all showed capabilities of running the ball. And defensively, other than a couple of big plays, which a couple came against the second and third team units, so I don't think there's as much to be worried about there. But, tough to take a lot out of that game because I don't think Beloit's very good. But I think the one thing, and Ben McCormick stressed it, is that we did what we had to do, and we came out of there.
They looked better than they looked.
They looked better in the
scrimmage,
scrimmage, and that's what he wanted to see the most, was the energy, the effort, and just the execution. And he got all three of those. I think improved all three phases, and that's what he took from that game.
I was down at Monterey for Parker and Middleton, as you alluded to. A really close game that came down to the final few minutes, and Middleton, the reigning conference champ, wins 21-19. I didn't expect it to be that close. I knew you thought it would be about a touchdown game. I think it really showed that Parker is looking better, and I think Middleton probably takes a small step back.
Comes back to the pack a little bit, yep.
But I was really impressed with Parker's defense. Cam Molly, a really impressive running back, goes for less than 100 yards. He had one 24-yard touchdown, but other than that, no double-digit carries, distance carries. It took him like 23 or 25 carries just to get to 80 yards. That's doing some pretty good work. There was great effort on the defensive side of the ball. And on offense, I think they showed that they can pass a little bit, which is something they haven't shown in the past few years. And I thought DJ Vance was really impressive out of the backfield. So all indications through week 1 looks like Parker is kind of on the uptick as we expected, and I think maybe even a little faster than maybe some had thought.
And I think the one thing to take out of both of those games is on the Parker side, how many trick plays did they have? Quite a few again. Yeah. I think they opened up the playbook and reached into the bag of tricks. Craig was pretty vanilla.
Yeah.
Craig was pretty vanilla on both sides of the ball. They only went out of 2 formations offensively. Defensively, again, it was tough to gauge against a Beloit team that really up front was way overmatched. But I think that's the one thing to take out of it is we saw quite a bit of Parker and what they're going to do, whereas Craig, Ben was able to kind of pull back the reins and not have to show a whole lot. And you may see that Craig playbook opened up a little bit more this week because they've got some weapons.
It will be interesting to see after watching Craig's rushing attack go for so many yards last week, see what the Parker defense can do to stop that.
Right.
But, I like what they did against Molly, so I would be interested to see what they do against the stable of running backs there. What else, as you kind of preview the weekend from that matchup, what are you thinking?
Well, and you touched on it earlier. I mean, Craig, Josiah Sabalos has got a kid that can kick. He had 2 or 3 kickoffs that went in the end zone, and obviously that lack of a kicker came back to haunt Parker, and not having that sure-footed, at least for extra points, put them behind the 8 ball, and they weren't able to recover. So, if it's close and Craig's forced to kick a field goal to win the game or tie the game, I think that's a much better option than Parker, who's probably got to try to find a way to score, get the ball in the end zone.
Yeah, I mean, even when I was watching Parker last week, and you got a couple minutes left, and you got to go 60 yards to get to the end zone, you're not thinking, well, if they could get
to the
40
20.
or 40, maybe they at least take
so
a try and
yarder
see
or
what
something,
happens.
yeah.
Well, they couldn't even seem to execute an extra point.
And that makes a difference defensively because you don't have to sit back in that prevent. You can put a little more pressure on knowing that, you know what, they got to go the length of the field. They don't have to get down to the 10 or the 15 or the 20, whatever. They got to get in the end zone, even though they're only down 2. So it changes things up. But I think you're going to see a much more open Craig offense, a much more diverse Craig offense than you saw last week. But, you know, in not being able to see Parker play, you know, I would expect a close game and I would expect a fast game. I think both teams want to control clock and run the ball. And unlike that marathon I witnessed last week that was 3 hours long, I think Friday night's game could be quick.
That'd be good for deadline.
Yes, it would be great for deadline. Yes.
Are we going out on a limb? Are you going to make a prediction here?
Well, and I think I told you what I thought. And no offense to Craig, but I think it's really tough to take anything away from the Beloit game because I like Parker by probably a little bit more than a touchdown just because I think defensively they'll be able to stop Craig. And I think offensively, you know, I think there's a lot of weapons and, you know, I think you had talked about the physicality of it and what the Parker defense brings. And certainly Craig's stepping way up in class against a much better defense. And I would say low scoring and maybe I'll say 20-7 Parker.
All right. That's similar to where I'm at. I'm a touchdown apiece more. I'm going Parker 28, Craig 14.
All right. That's fair. That means Parker made all their extra points.
Or missed 2 and went for 2 twice.
Okay.
They did make 1 extra point last week.
Okay.
So they're 1 for 2.
Well, regardless of what we think, it doesn't matter. It's irrelevant. I think it's going to be a good game, and I think it's just too bad they're playing now.
But get down there and watch it anyway.
Yeah, exactly.
It's not their fault that they got.
It's going to be a beautiful night at Monterey,
schedule.
and bring your off.
What else in week 2 catching your eye?
Well, I think the big one in the Badger, the crossover, is you've got Milton hosting Waunakee, 2 teams that were real good in week 1. Waunakee knocked Milton out of the playoffs last year in a second-round game, but a game that was close until probably the last 5 minutes when Waunakee scored twice late. Talking to Bill O'Leary, you know, he said, anytime you play Waunakee, you're playing that mystique. You're playing that aura of Waunakee football. And, you know, until they can get over that hump and prove that they can beat them, then that mystique remains. And he says our job this week is to end the mystique and get a win and put ourselves in a pretty good position heading into conference play.
I think they gave up a combined 3 points last week between the 2 teams. So I would expect a defensive battle, probably a low-scoring game.
I would agree. And, you know, Milton, I know, is going to come after Waunakee with some defensive sets that maybe they're not used to seeing. You know, Russell Larry will have that group ready to go. And offensively, I think, again, it's going to come down to ball control. I don't think either team's going to air it out. And, you know, who wins the battle up front will probably decide the game.
Most intriguing game in the Rock Valley, probably Evansville, Albany at Broadhead, Judah. Not a conference game, however.
No.
They played the same thing they said last year, right? They play this game because they're rivals.
Because they've been rivals for so long.
Crossovers don't play each other.
And they don't play each other. And because, you know, they're 12 miles apart or 15 miles apart, whatever. It is a great game. Evansville, you know, wins 28-0 in week 1. But according to some sources, they were without 11 players that were suspended for some reason. I'm not sure what that was. So I don't know if they're back at full strength this week. Broadhead Judah loses their opener to River Valley, which is always a good program. So, you know, I would expect if Evansville Albany is as good as people say they're going to be, you know, you'd expect them to go in there and come out of there with a win. And but Broadhead Judah doesn't get blown out, and they'll keep it competitive. And you know, again, that may be another somewhat low-scoring game, but I would expect the Blue Devils to come out of there with a win.
Well, I think you're right. Just to clarify, they technically could play twice this year.
They could,
because as we mentioned in the football preview, in the Rock Valley this year, the Week 8 and Week 9 games aren't set. Let's say Evansville Albany wins the North and Broadhead Judah wins the South, they'll play each other. Or if they're first and second, they would play each other another time. So that's kind of an interesting tidbit, and we'll see if they end up having a little rematch at the end of the season. And then probably the other one on the schedule, Delavan Darien at Bigfoot. 2 teams that last week came from behind and fought to make sure they got some wins.
Kind of an odd week for those two, because I think both you and I thought, you know what, is this finally the year that Bigfoot comes back down to earth? And I'm not saying it won't be, but certainly after week 1, gee,
they got it
they
done.
won again. They won again. And for Delavan, maybe just the opposite. I thought coming in that they'd be a little bit more explosive. Not that they weren't. They scored
were
a lot,
explosive
but they gave up a
offense.
lot. And against an East Troy team that, from all indications, is down numbers-wise and talent-wise. So,
well,
I think
talking to Greg Enns, I think he thinks actually the coach of Walworth Bigfoot that East Troy actually is on the uptick a little bit. So.
And that would make sense because I thought Delavan would handle them, and as it turned out, it's close. I think the one thing looking forward to Friday night is probably two of the best athletes in the area going at it, with Zach Greco and Benzing.
Yeah.
I mean, those are two kids that make things happen, and it maybe comes down to the arms or the feet or those two, and whichever one can make more plays. And again, that should be, if Delavan's defense isn't going to be very good, that should be another high-scoring affair.
You can find Bears preview for everything this week in Thursday's Gazette and on GazetteXtra.com.
Yes.
As we transition now to preseason turbulence. Are you on this bandwagon where we got to get rid of all preseason football games?
Well, I don't want to say get rid of all of it, because let's face it, rookies need to play, and rookies need to, you need to be able to evaluate your team. Not that I don't think you can do that on a day-to-day basis in an NFL, but I mean, somebody like Jameis Winston, he needs to play a game or two just to get his feet wet.
Looked good Monday, by the way.
He did. But, I mean, like Aaron Rodgers said, it's tough to lose a star player to a meaningless game. And if it's meaningless and he's Aaron Rodgers or I'm Aaron Rodgers, I guess I look at McCarthy and say, then why do I have to play?
Right.
Why do I even need to go in there? I mean, he banged his hand on somebody's helmet. Well, fortunately, it wasn't serious, but let's say, he dislocates a finger or he, breaks a hand or something in a meaningless game. Packer Nation goes crazy.
Well, they already
are.
Because Jordy Nelson is out
for
the
year. And fortunately, it's an area where they were able to re-sign Cobb, which now, looking back, was huge. And, with Adams and Montgomery, I think they'll be okay.
Janice, maybe.
I think they'll be okay. But the thing I took out of it was you just never know. I mean, he went up, makes a catch, plants, and no one near him, and that's how he did it. That's how he did it. And, that could have happened in week 1. That could have happened in week 4 of the regular season. I mean, that was just a freak injury. But it also tells you that, okay, you play 4 preseason games. Let's take it down to 2. They're not going to add 2 games in the regular season to make it 18. That's never going to happen. But you could reduce it to 2 games, and I still see enough of those kids that are trying to make the team to realize, okay, he's our 53rd man, or this guy can go on the practice squad. But to play 4 games, I understand it's the money and you sell out stadiums and everything else that goes with it, but we're talking about player safety, and it just keeps rearing its ugly head.
Well, and I think a 2 is a pretty good compromise, because then the owners still get 1 extra game from their season ticket revenue.
Yep.
And the players have to play 2 less games, I mean.
Yeah, I mean, so
and
if Aaron
season ticket
Rodgers
holders
plays 4 series and 2 games, Aaron Rodgers could.
Well, I mean,
he could play in his sleep.
You do have to get players up to full speed, and I think that's part of maybe some of these torn ACLs, and what we're seeing is that they're not ready to get up to full speed.
Right.
By the time that they're having these injuries, because they're non-contact. But that's what it's for, is to kind of get your body back ready. And I mean, you see it in every professional sport.
Yep,
I mean, that's what they do in baseball, why pitchers report a month early to get their arms ready for what's going to happen for 6 months. So,
and I think the NFL at some point will address it, but when you're talking money and that's such a cash cow, you don't think about it, but that 1 less home game for a place like Lambeau, that's a lot of money. It's a lot of money not coming into the coffers, and it's tough to give that up.
Let's maybe just talk about what we've seen from those receivers, just replacing Jordy, as we're a couple of weeks away yet from the regular season, but the Packers play again on Saturday, so they're probably going to need to see something from some of these guys that you mentioned already. Montgomery, I think they really like, at least as a returner.
They do.
He's looked really good as the first-round pick or first-year player from this past year's draft. I think he's surprised them a little bit.
And I think you're right. And I think, if you look at it now, certainly Cobb's your slot receiver, and Adams gives you that downfield threat that you need. But not only that, he's a guy that can go across the middle because he's a big target, and he's proven that he's made big strides in making catches and the proverbial yak yards after catches, which should improve this year. And I think with Montgomery on that 3rd down receiver, I've been impressed with Rodgers, the tight end. I think he's made big strides as well, and certainly Eddie Lacy's Eddie Lacy. So when you add all that in, the bottom line is you still got number 12 behind center, and I think you and I could probably play receiver with number 12 behind center and still be okay. So I think with Rodgers there, it's the one area on the team where you never want to see an injury, but they could afford to at least have that injury and know that there's backup. Now, if they hadn't gone out in the offseason and re-signed Cobb, then it's a different story. Then you're really, Randy Moss is talking about coming back. Reggie Wayne was available. He signed with the Patriots.
What about Wes Welker?
The
Packers have never really gone the route
Does he even know who he is anymore?
Well,
he's had gazillion concussions.
But he's got that goofy helmet now. So,
he does.
The Packers haven't really ever gone that route. Do you think they should?
Well, they did a little with Andre Rison. And I think the last year that, what was it, when Reggie White was there, that year that they won the Super Bowl, their wide receiver went down in preseason. So, that's the last time that happened, and they won the Super Bowl that year. So there's still plenty of weapons. I mean, don't get me wrong. And there's still, like I said, with Aaron Rodgers behind center, if he goes down, it is a big deal. But, it's a big deal that Nelson went down, but it's not – I don't think it makes them any less of a threat to win that division and certainly make a run at the Super Bowl.
We'll talk more about that as the NFL season approaches. For now, we've got to go let this rivalry get settled.
We do,
even though school hasn't started yet.
Next week, we promise we'll start in on Bucky. We'll talk Badger football when they open up with Alabama.
Next week, it's here. So
that's right. Mm-hmm.
We'll have to study up on
Same
that.
bat channel.
Let us know what you think of the show by leaving us a review on GazetteXtra.com or YouTube or iTunes or anywhere else that you've found us.
Facebook, any place. We don't care.
You can find us on Twitter. You can email us at sports@GazetteXtra.com. And we'll be back here next week, and I'm sure Andy Ryder will be producing the show once again.
He'll be that much closer to being a daddy.
That's true. We'll see you next week, everybody.
Take care, everybody.